I saw you with her, don't come home. I'm finished. One wrong digit. That's all it took. The message never reached Derek, the man who spent 3 years using Lauren's love like a credit card and her identity like a weapon. Instead, it landed on the private phone of Vincent Moretti, Chicago's most feared Mafia don at midnight. While he was hunting a traitor inside his own empire, he could have ignored it. He didn't. He typed back 4 words that changed everything. Come over. I'll make you forget him. Drop your city in the comments. Subscribe now. You will not want to miss a single second of what happens next. Lauren Hayes had always been the kind of woman who checked twice before she spoke. She measured her words, the way she measured everything else in her life, carefully, deliberately, with a quiet attention to detail that had made her one of the sharpest forensic accounting assistants in her firm. She noticed patterns other people missed. She caught discrepancies buried 3 layers deep in financial records. She was precise. She was methodical. And somehow, for 3 years, she had let Derek Sloan make her feel like she was losing her mind. It was a Friday night in November, and Chicago had turned mean. The kind of cold that doesn't just chill you, it gets inside you, settles into your chest and stays there. Rain came down sideways outside the apartment window, streaking the glass in long gray lines. Lauren stood in the kitchen, still wearing the blue dress she'd put on 2 hours ago. The dress Derek had told her she looked beautiful in, back when he still said things like that. The candles on the table had burned low. The pasta she'd made from scratch, his favorite, the one with the lemon cream sauce, had gone stiff and cold in the serving bowl. She hadn't touched it. She'd been standing at the counter for 40 minutes, phone in hand, watching the screen for a message that wasn't coming. Their 3rd anniversary. She had circled the date on her phone calendar 3 weeks ago. She'd bought the wine. He liked a specific bottle she'd had to visit 2 different stores to find. She'd turned down overtime at work, which she never did, because she wanted the evening to feel like something. She wanted it to feel like they were still worth the effort. Derek had texted at 6:30, running late. Don't wait to eat. That was it. No explanation, no apology. Just that flat little instruction, as if she were staff. She waited anyway. At 8 o'clock, she tried calling. Voicemail. At 9, she tried again. Voicemail. By 10, she'd stopped counting the calls she wasn't making, the texts she was composing in her head and choosing not to send, because she already knew somewhere in the place she never let herself look directly what was probably happening. She just didn't have proof yet. The proof arrived at 11:47 in the form of a photograph. Someone from her office, a woman named Priya, who had never particularly liked Derek, sent it without a caption, just the image. Lauren stared at it for a long moment, not breathing. Derek was at a place called the Velvet Room, a lounge on Michigan Avenue that Lauren had walked past a dozen times and never gone inside because Derek always said it was overpriced and pretentious. He was seated in a curved leather booth, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, relaxed in a way she hadn't seen him be in months. His arm was around a woman with long, dark hair, not around her shoulders in a friendly way, around her. His face was turned toward hers, and he was laughing. Lauren recognized the laugh. It was the easy one, the one he only used when he wasn't performing. She set the phone down on the counter. She picked up her wine glass, realized it was empty, and set it back down. She didn't cry. That surprised her. She'd always assumed that when the moment finally came, she would cry. Instead, she felt something colder, something that moved through her slowly and quietly, like water finding every crack in a foundation. It wasn't grief, not exactly. It was the awful clarifying sensation of something you already knew becoming something you could no longer pretend you didn't. She picked up her phone again, and she started typing. Her hands were shaking not from sadness, but from the particular kind of anger that only comes when you realize you've been angry for a very long time and have spent years calling it something else. She typed the way she never let herself talk, without editing, without performing calm, without giving him the benefit of her restraint. I saw you with her. Don't come home. Leave your key with the doorman. I'm finished being the woman you remember only when you need something. She hit send before she could talk herself out of it. The message showed delivered immediately. She stared at the screen. Her breath came in one long, slow exhale, and then nothing. The horrible, familiar nothing of waiting for Derek Sloan to respond. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that she had transposed 2 digits in the number, a 7 that should have been a 1. A mistake so small it wouldn't have mattered on any other night, in any other city, under any other circumstances. But this was Chicago, and the number she'd sent that message to was not Derek's. Across the city in a neighborhood where the houses sat far enough back from the street that the rain barely seemed to reach them, a phone vibrated on a desk made of dark wood that was older than most of the people who worked in the building. Vincent Moretti did not look up immediately. He was reading. Not a book. He hadn't read a book for pleasure in years. Not since his father's death had made pleasure feel like a luxury he hadn't earned. He was reading a ledger. Columns of numbers, transaction records, names. He'd been reading versions of this same document, with slight variations, for the past 4 hours. Because somewhere in these numbers was the shape of a lie, and he intended to find it. The desk lamp cast a circle of yellow light over the papers. Outside the tall windows, Lake Michigan moved in the dark, restless and vast. Vincent's estate sat at the water's edge, 12,000 square feet of stone and silence, staffed by people who were very good at being invisible, guarded by men who were very good at being present. It was the kind of house that should have felt powerful. Mostly it felt empty. He picked up the phone. Read the message. Read it again. He had received wrong number messages before. Everyone had. Usually they were something mundane, a reminder about a dentist appointment, a question about whether someone needed milk from the store. This was neither of those things. This was a woman at the end of her rope. He could feel it in the phrasing, not performed, not dramatic for its own sake, but genuinely at the bottom of something. I'm finished being the woman you remember only when you need something. He read that line twice. He'd known women who had said versions of that sentence. He'd known men who had been the reason for it. He set the phone down, picked up his pen, looked back at the ledger, picked up the phone again. He wasn't a man who acted on impulse. He had spent 20 years building a reputation for the opposite. Every move he made was calculated. Every word was chosen. The men who worked for him moved at the speed of his decisions, which were never fast and never random. Impulse in his world was how people got hurt. And yet, he typed wrong number. But come over. I'll make you forget him. Then, before he could examine why he'd done it, he added his address. He set the phone down, pressed his knuckles against his mouth, and stared at the lamp. What he'd done made no practical sense. He was in the middle of a crisis, a quiet one, the kind that didn't announce itself with gunfire but with ledger discrepancies, and a slowly growing certainty that someone close to him was betraying him. He did not have time for a stranger's romantic problems. And yet the message had felt more honest than anything anyone in this house had said to him in weeks. He had replied because he was tired. Not physically tired, that was manageable. He was tired in a place that sleep didn't reach. Tired of rooms full of people who said exactly what they calculated he wanted to hear. Tired of being treated like a variable to be managed rather than a person to be talked to. Tired of the silence that expanded to fill the space around him, no matter how many people populated it. He hadn't expected her to respond. Lauren read the reply 4 times. Her first thought was that it was Derek being cruel, pretending to be someone else, mocking her. But the tone was wrong. Derek's cruelty was passive. It came wrapped in plausible deniability. This was something else, direct. Almost startlingly calm. She looked at the phone number more carefully and noticed, for the first time, the transposed digits. Her stomach dropped. She had sent her most raw, unguarded message to a stranger. She opened her browser and searched the address. What came back made her go very still. The estate on the lake. The name Moretti. Stories she'd read in pieces, fragments of news articles that couldn't ever quite say what they were implying. Mentions in financial columns. A profile from 8 years ago that described Vincent Moretti as a businessman of significant and varied interests. And underneath all of that, the other layer. The layer that Chicago's newspapers skirted around carefully, the layer that everyone in the city seemed to know about without anyone ever having confirmed it directly. The man who had just told her to come over was rumored to be the most powerful, organized crime figure in Illinois. She put her phone face down on the counter. She took a breath. She thought, okay, obviously I'm not going. And then her actual phone rang. The one Derek knew about. She answered it because her hand moved before her brain had fully engaged. And she immediately heard the voice she'd been expecting, Derek, calling not to apologize, not to explain, not even to deny what she'd seen. What the hell did you think you were doing? He said. His voice had that particular flatness that meant he'd done the math and decided anger was the better play. Sending me that message? Do you know who was in that lounge? People who know me professionally. You're embarrassing. I don't care, Lauren said. And what surprised her was that she meant it completely. You reset. Lauren, listen to me. Whatever you think you saw, I saw you, she said. Priya sent me the picture. It was clear, silence on the line. Then the recalibration. She recognized the moment when Derek abandoned one strategy and reached for another. She could practically hear the gears turning. Fine, he said. Fine, we can talk about this. But the way you acted, texting me that, Lauren, I need you to understand something. The loan I told you about, the one for the new business venture. Her attention sharpened. What about it? A pause that was half a second too long. I may have listed you as a co-guarantor, just as a formality. It doesn't mean anything. The business is doing well. Derek, her voice had gone flat. Tell me exactly what you did. What he told her, in fragments, with qualifications and soft language designed to blunt each blow before it landed, was this: he had used her identity as a financial guarantor on a private business loan without her knowledge or consent. The loan was substantial. The business in question, based on his description, did not appear to be doing well at all. And if it defaulted, her name, her credit, her financial history, the future she had spent years quietly building, while he spent his money on bottle service, and other women, would be collateral damage. She sat down. Her legs had made the decision for her. How long, she said. Lauren, how long ago did you do this? He didn't answer, which was an answer. She said, I want you to know that this conversation is going to have consequences. I don't know what those look like yet. But I need you to understand that I am not going to let this happen to me without doing something about it. You're being, don't, she said quietly. Don't tell me what I'm being. You don't get to do that anymore. She hung up. She sat in her blue dress in her quiet kitchen with the cold pasta and the burned down candles, and she looked at her phone. At two screens open simultaneously, the text conversation with the wrong number, and the recent call log with Derek's name at the top. She thought about the woman in that photograph, the ease of Derek's laugh, the way his whole body language had been different. She thought about 3 years of conversations where she had edited herself down to something manageable, something that didn't ask too much, something that would keep the peace. She thought about the loan, about her name on a document she'd never signed, used to guarantee money she'd never seen, for a man who was currently calling her embarrassing for finding out about it. And then she did something that surprised even herself. She opened the wrong number conversation and looked at the address again. She texted Naomi. Naomi Brooks had been Lauren's closest friend since college, the kind of friend who showed up with food when you were sick and told you the truth when you asked for it and sometimes when you didn't. She was also, fortunately, the kind of person who responded to texts at midnight without requiring extensive context. Lauren typed, I'm going to give you an address. I need you to check on me in 2 hours. If I don't respond, call the police. Naomi's response came in under 60 seconds. Lauren Christine Hayes, what are you doing? Lauren, I'll explain later. 2 hours. Naomi, I'm looking up this address right now. Is this the Morty estate? Lauren, 2 hours. Naomi, I'm calling you. Lauren, don't. I'll explain everything tomorrow. 2 hours, a long pause. Then fine. 2 hours. But you better call me the second you leave, and I want every single detail, and also maybe you've lost your mind. Lauren put on her coat. She found her keys. She stood at the door of the apartment she'd chosen, furnished and paid for the apartment, Derek treated as a background set for his life, and she felt something shift in her chest. Not courage exactly. Something quieter than that. Something that had more to do with the simple clarifying arithmetic of having nothing left to lose. She had spent 3 years making small and large surrenders in the hope that they would eventually add up to security. They hadn't. She had spent 3 years telling herself that the next conversation, the next explanation, the next version of Derek would be different. He wasn't. She had spent 3 years treating her own discomfort as a problem with her perception rather than a problem with the situation. Not tonight. Tonight, she was going to drive to the lakeside estate of a man who was possibly the most dangerous person in Chicago, because he had responded to her pain with honesty instead of performance, and because the alternative was sitting alone in this apartment, letting Derek's decisions happen to her. She got in her car. The rain had not let up. Chicago at midnight in November was a study in gray, the wet streets reflecting the orange glow of streetlights, the lake hidden behind the dark and the weather, the city moving at its reduced nighttime pace. She drove with both hands on the wheel, and her phone mounted on the dash showing her the route, and she did not let herself think too hard about what she was doing, because she had a feeling that if she thought about it too hard, she would turn around. She called Naomi on the way. Not because she needed to talk, she wasn't sure she could explain any of this yet, but because Naomi's voice felt like a tether. I'm driving, Lauren said. I see your location, Naomi said. She had pulled up the live share. You're actually going. I'm going. Lauren. Naomi's voice changed, the teasing fell away, and what was underneath it was just concern, the real kind, the kind that cost something. What happened tonight? And don't say it's complicated, because I will drive to wherever you are. Lauren told her. All of it, the photograph, the anniversary dinner, Derek's call, the loan, the wrong number, the replies she'd received. Naomi was quiet through most of it. Then she said, he used your identity without your consent. Yes, for a business loan he never told you about. Yes. And now you're going to the house of a man who some people believe runs organized crime in this city. Yes. Okay, Naomi said. Then, with the precision that Lauren loved her for, what do you need from me right now? Just stay on until I get there. And then 2 hours. I've got you, Naomi said simply. They talked until the navigation told Lauren to turn through the iron gates. And then Naomi said, quietly and seriously, Lauren, if anything feels wrong, you get out immediately. You hear me? I hear you. I mean it. Not 1 second of being polite if something feels wrong. I know. Lauren looked at the gates. They were open, swinging inward as she approached, which meant he'd known she was coming before she arrived. She thought about what that implied and chose to set it aside for the moment. I'll text you in 2 hours. 1 hour and 59 minutes, Naomi corrected. I'm setting a timer. The driveway was long, lined with lights that were practical rather than decorative, the kind of lighting that illuminated without announcing itself. That made sure whoever was on the grounds could be seen without making a show of it. Lauren noticed it the way she noticed most things: filed, cataloged, registered. She parked where a man in a dark coat indicated, with a gesture that was courteous but left no room for interpretation about where the car should go. She got out, turned up her collar against the rain, and walked toward the front entrance. The door opened before she knocked. The man who opened it was not Vincent Moretti. He was younger, broader, with the kind of stillness that came from training rather than temperament. He looked at her the way security personnel look at everyone, not unfriendly, but assessing. Ms. Hayes, he said. The fact that he knew her name made her stomach clench. He ran my plate, she said. It wasn't a question. Standard procedure. The man stepped back. Mr. Moretti is in the study. I'll take you. I'd rather you tell me the layout, Lauren said, and where the exits are. The man paused. Then something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. Foyer, hallway, study is at the end. Kitchen is through the door on the left, halfway down. 2 exits from this floor, the front door and the side door through the kitchen. The main staircase leads to the second floor guest suites. I'm Gabriel Shaw. I run security. If at any point you need to leave, you tell me and you leave. She studied him. You'd actually let me? Those are his instructions, Gabriel said evenly. She nodded once, and she followed him down the hall. She had expected, walking into the home of a man with Vincent Moretti's reputation, to feel surrounded, watched, pressured. She had expected the weight of power to be obvious wealth, displayed to remind visitors of their relative smallness, staff positioned to make movement feel monitored. The hall was quiet, well lit with good furniture, but not performative. The kind of space that had been lived in rather than staged. There were books on a shelf that looked actually read. There was a coat rack near the entry that had an ordinary umbrella hanging from it. She found these details oddly steadying. Gabriel knocked once on the study door and opened it. Lauren's first impression of Vincent Moretti, which she would later think about more than she expected to, was that he looked tired. Not in the visible, disheveled way. He was dressed in a dark suit that still held its structure even at this hour. His posture at the desk, the kind of upright that came from years of expecting to be watched. His face was composed. The surface of him was completely in order. But his eyes, when they met hers, had the quality of someone who had been alone inside a particular thought for a very long time. He stood when she entered. A reflex, she thought. Old-fashioned and automatic. Ms. Hayes, he said. You ran my plate, she said again, because she needed that to be acknowledged before anything else could happen. I did, he said, no apology in it, but no hostility either. Just a flat acknowledgement of a thing he'd done. That's invasive, she said. Yes, he agreed. She waited for more. He didn't add anything. I need to know a few things before this conversation goes any further, she said. She was aware of Gabriel still present in the doorway, which she decided was fine. Witnesses were fine. First, my phone stays with me. Second, I leave when I decide to leave. Third, nothing about this interaction goes anywhere, not to Derek, not to anyone connected to Derek, not to anyone who knows Derek's name. Can you agree to those things? Vincent Moretti, who had not been given a list of conditions by anyone in what felt like a very long time, looked at her with an expression she couldn't immediately categorize. Yes, he said. Then say them back to me, Lauren said. Another pause. Gabriel in the doorway was very carefully not reacting. Your phone stays with you, Vincent said, his voice even. You leave when you decide to. Nothing about tonight reaches anyone connected to the man you were texting. Good, Lauren said. She walked to the chair across the desk from where he'd been sitting and sat down in it. Now, you said you'd make me forget him. I want you to know I'm not here for that. I'm here because my other option was sitting in my apartment letting a bad night win. So you can drop that. He sat back down slowly. For the first time since she'd entered the room, something shifted in his expression. Not a smile exactly, but its suggestion. All right, he said. Why did you reply, she asked. He considered that. She liked that he considered it, rather than answering immediately with something smooth. Honestly, please. Because your message sounded true, he said. And I hadn't heard anything true in several days. Lauren looked at him for a long moment. That's a very sad thing to say. Yes, Vincent Moretti agreed. It is. Outside, the rain kept coming down. The lake moved somewhere in the dark beyond the windows. And Lauren Hayes, who had come here to stop being controlled by the wrong man's decisions, sat across from the most powerful and possibly most dangerous man in Chicago, and felt, for the first time all evening, that she was somewhere she had arrived at by her own choice. It wasn't safe. She knew that, but it was hers. She said, tell me what's in those papers on your desk. He looked at her. Why? Because you were reading them when I walked in, she said, and you've got a fresh cut on your knuckles. And whatever is in those papers is the reason you answered a stranger's wrong-numbered text at midnight instead of handling your actual problem. And I'm a forensic accounting assistant. She held his gaze. So tell me what's in the papers. Vincent Moretti, who had not told anyone in his organization what he'd actually found in those ledgers, who had spent 4 hours alone with the shape of a betrayal he couldn't yet prove, looked at the woman across his desk with her rain-damp coat and her hands that were still shaking slightly, and her absolute refusal to be intimidated. He reached for the ledger, and then his phone rang. He looked at the screen. His jaw tightened with a controlled precision that Lauren recognized immediately as the face of someone absorbing bad news without permission to react to it. I need to take this. Take it, Lauren said. And then, because she had earned the right to be direct, I'll be here. He answered the call. Spoke 3 sentences in Italian, quick and low, then switched to English. What she heard in those 3 sentences, the flatness of his voice, the specific stillness that moved through his body, told her clearly that the problem in those papers had just gotten worse. He hung up. For a moment, he looked at the desk rather than at her. The man who's been moving money out of my accounts, he said. More to the desk than to her. Just had dinner with someone he shouldn't have. Lauren looked at the ledger. Then at him. How much is missing? He met her eyes. Enough. She nodded once. Then we'd better figure out where it went. And in the dim light of the study, with the rain against the windows and the lake moving in the dark, Lauren Hayes opened the ledger she hadn't been invited to touch, ran her finger down the first column of numbers, and found in less than 40 seconds the first discrepancy Vincent had missed. There, she said. That's your starting point. Vincent Moretti leaned forward. And for the first time all evening, something in his face changed from carefully managed to genuinely present. Whatever this night had become, it was no longer about forgetting anyone. The first discrepancy Lauren found was small. That was the point. It was designed to be small. A transaction dated 8 weeks prior, routed through what appeared to be a vendor account for a shipping supply company based in Milwaukee. The amount was unremarkable. The vendor name was ordinary. If you were reading fast, if you were reading the way busy people read financial records skimming for the large and obvious, you would pass right over it. Lauren did not read fast. She never had. This vendor, she said, tapping the line with her index finger. When did you last use them? Vincent leaned over the desk, close enough that she was aware of him in her peripheral vision, the controlled stillness of a man who had learned to take up precisely the amount of space he intended, and no more. He looked at the line. They supply rope and rigging for the dock operations. We use them regularly. Do you have the invoices? Lauren asked. He opened the bottom drawer of the desk and produced a folder without being asked, which told her he'd already been in these records, already sensed something, just hadn't known where to put his finger on it. She went through the invoices in order, matching dates to transactions, and then she stopped. This transaction has no invoice, she said. Same vendor name, same account number, same amount format. But there's no corresponding invoice in your records. Vincent was very still. Now look at this one, Lauren said, flipping back 2 pages. Same thing, and this. Another page, and this. She laid 3 sheets side by side on the desk. 8 weeks. Someone has been running transactions through a vendor account that looks completely legitimate, using amounts small enough not to trigger automatic review, but doing it often enough that over 2 months the total is. She did the calculation quickly in her head, roughly $400,000. The silence in the room was the kind that has weight. Raymond, Vincent said. His voice was flat, not loud. Flatness was worse. Lauren was already learning. Than volume. I don't know who Raymond is, she said. But whoever set this up knew your systems. They knew your review thresholds. They knew which vendor accounts would look routine. She looked at him. That's not someone who hacked their way in from outside. That's someone who sits in meetings with you. Vincent pushed back from the desk. He stood and walked to the window, not to look at anything, she thought, but because remaining seated had become impossible. He stood with his back to her for a moment, and Lauren watched the line of his shoulders and recognized what was happening there. She had done the same thing herself earlier tonight, standing at her kitchen counter. The moment when you absorb a truth you were already half prepared for, and your body needs a second to catch up to what your mind already knew. His name is Raymond Voss, Vincent said without turning around. He's been with my organization for 11 years. My father trusted him. And you? Lauren asked. A long pause. I trusted him because my father did, Vincent said, which is not the same thing. He turned back. His face had reorganized itself. The tiredness she'd seen when she first walked in was gone, replaced by something harder. Not anger exactly. More like a decision being made in real time. I need to make a call, he said. Make it, Lauren said. She started going through the next set of pages. He stepped out. She heard his voice in the hallway, low, controlled, giving instructions she couldn't make out. She used the time to work backward through the ledger, from the point of the first false transaction, looking for pattern. There was always a pattern. People who stole money thought they were being clever, and clever people were predictable because they stuck to what worked. She found the second layer 4 minutes later. When Vincent came back into the room, she had 3 separate sheets laid out with notes she'd written in the margin of the legal pad she'd found on the corner of his desk. She'd helped herself to it. He noticed and said nothing about it. There are 2 systems running simultaneously, she said. The first one, the vendor account, that's the one I just showed you. 400,000 over 8 weeks, small transactions, designed to look routine. She pointed to the second set of sheets. This one is different. These are transfers moving through what looks like a legitimate business operating account. But the business, she checked the name she'd written. Lakeview Consulting Solutions. Does that mean anything to you? Vincent was looking at the papers. His expression had become completely unreadable. No, it should, Lauren said. Because it shares a registered agent address with a company called DRS Capital Partners, she looked up at him, which is the private lending company that Derek used to take out a loan in my name. The room went very quiet. Vincent looked at her for a long moment. Say that again. Lauren said it again, slower, watching his face as she did. She had a specific skill developed over years of forensic work for reading a person's reaction to information and distinguishing between genuine surprise and performed surprise. What she saw in Vincent's face right now was neither. It was something more complicated. The look of a man watching 2 separate problems suddenly reveal themselves as one problem, and trying to hold the implications of that still enough to examine them. That's not a coincidence, he said. No, Lauren agreed. It's not. She waited. She'd learned, doing this work, that the moment after an unexpected revelation required space. Push into it too fast and people shut down. Give it room and they thought out loud, which was where the real information came from. Raymond has been looking for ways to move money outside my usual channels for months, Vincent said slowly. We had disagreements last spring about the lending operations. I wanted to reduce the portfolio. He argued against it. Strenuously. His jaw tightened. And now you're telling me that the lending company he wanted to keep is connected to a man who stole your identity. I'm telling you they share a registered agent address, Lauren said carefully. That's a connection. What kind of connection, I don't know yet. But Derek is not a sophisticated criminal. Someone helped him set this up. Someone who knew how to use a private lending structure to move money through names that wouldn't trigger attention. Names like yours, Vincent said. Names like mine, Lauren confirmed. except that I didn't volunteer my name. Derek used it without my knowledge, which means whoever designed this system was looking for people who wouldn't notice or who could be controlled enough not to fight back. She paused. He picked the wrong person. Something moved across Vincent's face. Not quite a smile. Something apparently, he said. His phone rang again. He answered it in the hallway again. This time she could hear, just barely, the cadence of the conversation, two voices, quick exchanges, and then a silence on Vincent's end that lasted long enough to be significant. When he came back, she knew before he spoke that something had changed. Raymond met with someone tonight, Vincent said. I had my people check the restaurant he went to after his supposed dinner meeting. He met with a man named Castellano. He paused, and the pause was doing a lot of work. Carlo Castellano runs the West Side operations. He and I have an arrangement, a careful one. Lauren set down her pen. And Raymond meeting with him without your knowledge that breaks the arrangement? That makes the arrangement meaningless, Vincent said. Because whatever Raymond told him, it wasn't authorized. And whatever Raymond offered him, he stopped. Is it leverage? Lauren asked quietly. Vincent met her eyes. If Raymond has been documenting my financial operations while simultaneously cleaning money through them, and if he gives those records to Castellano framed in the right way, then Castellano doesn't just have information, Lauren finished. He has a case. Against you specifically, cleaned of Raymond's fingerprints. She watched Vincent absorb this, watched him stand in the center of his study, surrounded by the evidence of a betrayal that was more comprehensive and more dangerous than he'd understood even an hour ago. She'd seen people receive news like this before, the slow collapse of a structure you'd been living inside, the moment when you realized the walls weren't what you thought they were. Most people in that moment went quiet in a way that meant they'd withdrawn somewhere internal. Vincent went quiet in a different way, the quiet of someone thinking very hard, very fast, without the luxury of letting it show. I need to go, he said. I know, Lauren said. I'll have Gabriel. Don't arrange anything for me, she said. Tell me where the guest rooms are and I'll find one myself. I'm not leaving in this rain and I'm not being escorted anywhere. He looked at her for a moment. Second floor, third door on the left. There's a lock on the inside. Good, she said. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, shrugged into it in one smooth motion, and started toward the door. Then he stopped, which she hadn't expected. The connection you found, he said without turning around, between Raymond's accounts and the company your ex-boyfriend used. Don't let that go anywhere tonight. It's in my head, Lauren said. It goes where I go. He turned then, looked at her across the study, with the lamp still casting its circle of light across the papers she'd been working through. She thought he was going to say something. She could see the intention of it forming, whatever it was. Instead, he said, thank you. Then he was gone. Lauren sat alone in Vincent Moretti's study, surrounded by his financial records, and let herself breathe for the first time since she'd left her apartment. Her hands had finally stopped shaking. She looked down at the legal pad where she'd been taking notes. At the names she'd written, the account numbers, the sequence of transactions she'd traced backward through 8 weeks of careful, patient theft. She looked at the name DRS Capital Partners, and the name Derek had dropped into their phone call like it was nothing, like it was just paperwork, like it was just a formality. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app and began transferring everything she'd written, every number, every name, every date, into a document she could access anywhere. She worked quickly and completely, the same way she'd been trained to work. Treat every piece of information as if it might be the piece that mattered later, because you can never know in advance which one it is. When she was done, she texted Naomi, I'm staying until morning. I'm safe. I'll call you when I'm up. Naomi's response was immediate. You better send me your location every hour or I'm calling the National Guard. Lauren sent her the location pin and then turned back to the ledger. She meant to go to bed. She genuinely intended to close the folder, put down the pen, go find the guest room on the second floor, and let the rest of this be someone else's problem until daylight. She had given enough of herself to this evening already. She had found the connection. She had done something useful. She was entitled to sleep. Instead, she turned to the next page of the ledger and kept reading, because there was still something wrong. The shape of what she'd found was right: the vendor account, the consulting shell company, the pattern of small regular transfers. But there was an asymmetry in the numbers that nagged at her. The amounts going out didn't quite balance against the amounts coming in from the legitimate operations, even accounting for the theft. There was a gap. Not large, but not nothing. She went back to the beginning and read slower. She didn't find it until after 2 in the morning, and when she found it, she had to read it twice to be sure she was seeing what she was seeing. Because it wasn't just money leaving. Raymond Voss had also been documenting. The notes were coded shorthand entries tucked inside what appeared to be routine operational memos, the kind of internal records that accumulate in any business and rarely get examined closely. But Lauren had been looking at them closely for 2 hours now, and the code wasn't complicated once you saw the shape of it. It was the same code structure she'd seen Derek use in his own financial notes, the same format, the same compression conventions. Which meant Raymond and Derek hadn't just been connected through the lending company. They'd been communicating directly, coordinating. Lauren set down the ledger. She pressed both palms flat on the desk and stared at the wall. Derek was not an innocent bystander. He had not stumbled into this. He had been placed deliberately at the intersection of Lauren's personal life and Vincent Moretti's financial operations. Someone had put him there on purpose. She picked up her phone. She did not call Naomi, not yet. What she was looking at was not something she could explain quickly or casually, and she needed to sit with it for a moment first. She did not call Vincent, she didn't have his number, and even if she had, he was currently dealing with something that was already pulling at every thread she just identified. She sat with the knowledge alone in the quiet study and let herself understand the full shape of what she'd walked into. The wrong number had not been random. Or rather, it had been random in the mechanical sense. She'd transposed 2 digits. The message had gone to a stranger's phone. That part was genuinely accidental. But the fact that this particular stranger's finances intersected with this particular fraudulent loan in this particular way that was not random. That was the result of someone building something with multiple moving parts, multiple people, multiple entry points, and either not anticipating that the parts might encounter each other or not caring. She thought about Derek's voice on the phone earlier, the way he'd brought up the loan almost casually, not as a confession, but as a negotiating position. She thought about how quickly he'd pivoted when she pushed back. That was not the behavior of someone who'd made a desperate one-off mistake. That was the behavior of someone with options. Someone who believed he had enough cover, that one angry girlfriend with a burner phone wasn't a problem he needed to solve completely. She needed to be careful, very careful, because if Derek was deeper in this, then he'd let on, and if he figured out that she'd spent the night in Vincent Moretti's study, and if he understood what she might have seen. Her phone buzzed on the desk. She looked at the screen. It was Derek. Not a call, a text. At 2:17 in the morning. I know you're not home. Your location's off. Lauren, wherever you are, you need to call me. Tonight. This is not something you want to play games with. She read it twice. Then she read it again. Not a threat. Not quite, but not a worried boyfriend either. It was the language of someone who needed her compliance for a reason that had nothing to do with love or remorse. Her location was off because she'd stopped sharing it after she'd sent Naomi the pin privacy habit, something she'd done automatically. But Derek, noting the absence of her location, meant he'd been monitoring it, which meant he had a reason to want to know where she was. She typed back, I'm fine. Don't contact me again tonight. She hit send. Then she went into her settings and removed Derek's access to her location entirely. She pulled up Gabriel's number. Vincent had given it to her on a card before he left, which she was now very grateful for, and texted it. I found something else in the records. It's significant. Can you make sure Mr. Moretti knows when he's back? Gabriel's response came in less than a minute. Noted. Are you secure? She almost laughed. I'm in the study. I'm fine. I'll let him know. Lock the study door if you prefer. She looked at the door. Then she stood, crossed the room, and locked it. Then she went back to the desk, sat down, and opened a fresh page on the legal pad. She wrote Derek's name at the top, then Raymond Voss's name, then DRS Capital Partners, then the vendor account number she'd identified from the ledger. She drew connecting lines, she added dates. She wrote down everything she knew and everything she suspected, and everything that was still missing, because the gap between those 3 categories was where the truth lived, and she was not going to sleep until she understood its shape. Outside, the rain began to ease. She could hear it changing from the hard driving sound it had made all evening to something quieter and more scattered, the tail end of the storm working itself out. The lake, somewhere beyond the wall she couldn't see through, would be calmer by morning. Lauren Hayes, who had left her apartment a few hours ago to stop surrendering, sat in a locked room in a stranger's house and built the architecture of a conspiracy on a legal pad and felt, underneath the fear and the adrenaline and the exhaustion, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt competent, not because someone had told her she was, not because a man had validated her or a situation had required her to perform capability for an audience. She felt it the way you feel things that are true in the quiet, in the absence of applause, when you're alone with a problem in your own mind and nothing else. She kept working. It was almost 4 in the morning when she heard the front door. Footsteps in the hall, 2 sets, then one, and the second one continuing, passing the study, going further back into the house. Then a single set, stopping outside the door. A knock, 2 quiet raps. Miss Hayes, Gabriel's voice. She unlocked the door and opened it. Gabriel looked tired but composed. Behind him, at the far end of the hall, she could see the edge of Vincent's jacket as he disappeared around a corner. "He's back," she said. "He's back," Gabriel confirmed. "The situation with Voss is," he chose his word carefully, "contained. For now. I need to talk to him," Lauren said. "Not tonight, he should sleep. But first thing." Gabriel looked at the legal pad in her hand, the pages she'd filled, the diagrams she'd drawn, the names she'd connected. His expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. "What did you find?" he asked. "Something that changes what tonight was about," she said. "Something that changes what this whole thing is about." Gabriel studied her for a moment with the particular attention of someone who had spent years evaluating threats and was reassessing which category she belonged to. "I'll make sure he's available at 7, he said. "Thank you," Lauren said. She went upstairs. Third door on the left, as Vincent had said. The room was clean and quiet, and the bed was made. She set the legal pad on the nightstand, still covered in her handwriting. She set her phone on the charger. She lay down on top of the covers in her blue dress. She didn't have anything else to change into, and she was too tired to care. She stared at the ceiling. She thought about the message she'd sent at midnight, the one she'd fired off in the dark, shaking with anger and heartbreak, to the wrong number. She thought about the chain of events that had followed. Not a rescue. A series of choices, each one hers. She had driven here herself. She had sat down across from a man most people were afraid to look in the eye, set her own terms, and held to them. She had opened a ledger she hadn't been invited to touch and found what the professionals around him had missed. She had stayed when she could have left, not because she was afraid to leave, but because the work wasn't done. She thought about Derek's text. "This is not something you want to play games with." He was wrong about that. She wasn't playing games. But she was, for the first time in 3 years, playing to win. The last thing she thought before she fell asleep was not about Vincent Moretti or Raymond Voss or the legal pad full of evidence on the nightstand. It was not about what would happen in the morning or what the next 48 hours might require of her. She thought about the dinner she'd made, the pasta with the lemon cream sauce, gone cold on the anniversary table. She'd spent 3 years cooking that kind of dinner for a man who couldn't be bothered to come home for it. She was done making dinners for men who didn't deserve them. Sleep, when it came, arrived without warning, heavy and complete, the way it does when the body has finally run out of things to brace against. She woke at 6:45 to her phone alarm, still in her blue dress, legal pad on the nightstand exactly where she'd left it. For exactly 3 seconds, she didn't remember where she was. Then it came back, all of it, in sequence like a file loading. The pasta, the photograph, the wrong number, the ledger. Derek's 2:17 in the morning text that wasn't really a worried message at all. She sat up, picked up the legal pad, read everything she'd written in the hours before sleep, checking it with fresh eyes the way you check your own work after distance, looking for the places where exhaustion might have made something appear connected that wasn't, where emotion might have substituted for logic. It held. Every line of it held. She washed her face in the attached bathroom, finger-combed her hair, looked at herself in the mirror for a moment. The blue dress was wrinkled. She looked like someone who'd spent the night in a stranger's house working through a financial conspiracy, which was accurate. She decided she was fine with that. She was downstairs by 7. Vincent was already in the kitchen. This was not what she'd expected. She'd expected the study, the lamp, the desk, the ledger, the controlled formal distance of a man who operated behind wood and paper. Instead, he was standing at a professional-grade stove in a different shirt, no jacket, sleeves rolled to the elbows, doing something with a skillet that smelled like butter and herbs. He looked up when she walked in. "You cook," she said. "When I can't sleep," he said, "which is most nights." He nodded at the counter. Coffee's ready. She poured herself a cup and stood on the opposite side of the kitchen island, enough distance to be deliberate without being theatrical, and watched him work. He moved in the kitchen the way he'd moved in the study, efficiently, without wasted motion, with the particular ease of someone doing something they'd done enough times that the body remembered it without being asked. How did it go last night, she said with Voss. He wasn't where we expected him to be. Vincent didn't look up from the skillet. He moved, which means someone told him we were coming. Someone inside your operation. Yes. So the betrayal is deeper than one person. He was quiet for a moment. Yes. Lauren wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. I found something else last night. After you left, he turned off the burner, set 2 plates on the counter, looked at her. Tell me, she told. All of it, the coded notation in the operational memos, the communication pattern she'd decoded, the fact that it matched the same shorthand structure she'd seen in Derek's own financial notes, which she'd had access to during 3 years of a relationship with a man who never thought she was paying attention. She watched his face as she laid it out. He was a disciplined man, the kind who'd learned to keep his reactions from reaching his expression, because expression was information and information was leverage. But she was good at watching faces, and she could see the moment each piece landed. When she finished, he said, Derek knew your connection to me before you arrived. Not a connection, she corrected. He couldn't have known about the wrong number. But he knew, or someone told him, that my identity was attached to accounts that ran through Raymond's operation. He knew that if something went wrong, if anyone started pulling threads, my name would surface. She paused. I think I was placed there deliberately, as a distraction. The word hung between them. A shield, Vincent repeated. If investigators find my name on those documents, the first question is who I am and how I'm connected. That question points away from Raymond. It creates noise. It slows things down. She met his eyes. Derek told me last night that I was listed as a co-grantor on a business loan. What he didn't say, what I figured out from the ledger, is that the loan isn't just a financial instrument. It's a document trail. One that, if read without context, suggests I have a knowing financial relationship with businesses connected to your organization. Vincent set down his fork. Slowly. The way you set things down when the alternative is putting your fist through something. They were going to use you to get to me, he said. They were going to use me to muddy the water around you, Lauren said. Which is slightly different, but equally bad for me personally. She took a sip of coffee. My name is scheduled to appear on transfer documents within 48 hours. That's what Derek told me last night, without realizing he was telling me. He said the loan was a formality and the business was fine. The business is not fine. The transfer happens in 2 days. The kitchen was very quiet. You have 48 hours, Vincent said. We have 48 hours, Lauren said. Because the documents connecting my name to this operation also pass through your legitimate accounts. If those transfers go through, it doesn't just destroy my financial future. It gives Raymond exactly what he needs to hand Castellano a case with your name on it and mine as corroborating evidence. Vincent stood completely still for a moment. Then, he said, I need to make some calls. Before you do, Lauren said, I need to say something. He waited. Whatever you're planning to do about Raymond, however you intend to handle this, I need you to understand something. I am not a problem you get to solve by putting me somewhere safe and closing the door. I found this. I understand this better than anyone in your organization right now, because I know Derek's patterns and I know forensic account tracing, and I have been living inside this situation from the other end. You need me working this problem, not locked in a guest room while your people handle it. He looked at her for a long moment. The people I work with, he said carefully, don't generally give me conditions. I'm not one of the people you work with, Lauren said, and I'm not giving you conditions. I'm telling you the truth about what the situation requires. There's a difference. Another silence. Then what do you need? Access to the rest of the ledgers. All of them, not just the operational accounts. And I need to know everything Raymond has touched in the last 6 months. She picked up her coffee. And I need you to tell me honestly, is there anything else in those records that I'm going to find that changes what I already know? The question cost him something. She could see it. The answer, when it came, was careful and specific in a way that meant he was choosing exactly how much to say. Raymond has been managing a portfolio of lending businesses, Vincent said. Some of them are legal. Some of them are not. The illegal ones operate on a pressure model. They lend to people who can't qualify for conventional loans. And when those people can't repay, they use the debt as leverage. He paused. I was in the process of shutting those down. Raymond argued against it. And your name is on those businesses, Lauren said. Yes. So if Raymond gives those records to Castellano, framed as evidence against you, then the illegal operations look like mine. The money laundering looks like mine. And the documents with your name on them look like you were a knowing participant. He said it without softening it, which she appreciated, which is why Raymond set this up the way he did. He didn't just steal money. He built a portrait, one that destroys me and takes down anyone connected to me on the way. Lauren put down her coffee cup. Then we need to take apart the portrait before it gets delivered. They worked through breakfast, she eating with one hand while she wrote with the other, him on his phone making calls, in between reviewing the pages she passed him. It was not a comfortable domesticity. There was too much tension for that, too much weight in the silence between exchanges. But it was functional in a way that felt almost more intimate than comfort. Two people who had no particular reason to trust each other, choosing to anyway, because the alternative was worse. Gabriel arrived at 8:15 and the dynamic shifted. He brought two more men with him, professionals. Clearly, the kind who listened more than they spoke. Lauren acknowledged them and kept working. They gave her the space she held, which she took as confirmation that Vincent had spoken to them before coming downstairs. At 9:20, Gabriel's phone rang. He stepped out. He was back in 4 minutes, and the way he re-entered the room, the quality of his stillness, the fraction of hesitation before he spoke, told Lauren that whatever he was about to say had changed the timeline. Derek Sloan called the estate, Gabriel said. Everyone in the room went quiet. Lauren set down her pen. He called the estate, she repeated. He asked for Mr. Moretti by name, Gabriel said he had information about a mutual problem and wanted to arrange a meeting. He looked at Vincent. He gave his own name. He knows I'm here, Lauren said. Her voice was steady. Her mind was already moving, not in the direction of fear, but in the direction of implication. Or he suspects. He texted me at 2 in the morning asking where I was. He must have figured out. He didn't figure it out, Vincent said. His voice had gone flat in that particular way she'd already learned to take seriously. He was told, Raymond, Gabriel said. Raymond. Vincent looked at Lauren. Which means Raymond knows you're here. And it means they've already decided how they want to use that. Lauren stood up. She walked to the window, not to look out, but because her body needed movement to keep pace with her thinking. Derek calling the estate, giving his own name. That was bold. That was the kind of move you made when you believed you held the stronger hand. He wants a meeting, she said. Yes, Gabriel said. And he offered information about a mutual problem. She turned around. That means he's positioning this as a negotiation. He thinks he has something you want, or something you're afraid of. He thinks he has me, Vincent said. Maybe Lauren said. Or he thinks he has me and that I'm the leverage. She looked at Gabriel. Did he ask about me specifically? Gabriel hesitated one beat. He asked whether you were a guest of the estate. There it was. He wants to know if you can be used as pressure, she said to Vincent. If pulling me into this creates a complication for you. She watched his face. Does it? The question was direct. She needed the answer to be direct. Vincent looked at her across the room, and the look was not a businessman's look or a crime boss's look. It was simpler and more uncomfortable than either of those things. Yes, he said. Then he's going to try to use that, Lauren said. Which means we need to move faster than his timeline. Or we meet with him, Gabriel said. No, Lauren said immediately. Gabriel looked at her. It could surface information we don't. If Derek calls this estate and asks for a meeting and gets one, he learns 2 things. Lauren said, ticking them off on her fingers. 1, that Vincent is unsettled enough to take the meeting, which tells him his leverage is working. 2, that I'm here and apparently important enough to negotiate around, which confirms everything he's hoping is true. She dropped her hand. We don't give him either of those. Gabriel looked at Vincent. Vincent said, what do we do instead? We call him, Lauren said, but I call him. The room absorbed this. You call him, Gabriel repeated in the tone of someone who is not refusing, but is requesting confirmation that they heard correctly. I call him, Lauren said. He doesn't know what I know. He thinks I'm a scared ex-girlfriend who stumbled into something over her head and maybe found a powerful man to hide behind. He's going to tell me to come to him. He's going to offer to explain everything. He's going to use a combination of guilt and threat to try to get me in a position where he can manage me. She looked at Vincent. And while he's doing that, I'll be recording every word. And while he's talking to me about where to meet, your people can trace where the call is coming from. Silence. You've done this before, Gabriel said slowly. Not a question. I've worked fraud cases, Lauren said. The principle is the same. People who are running a con believe they're smarter than their mark. That belief makes them verbose. You just have to give them a reason to keep talking. Gabriel looked at Vincent again. Vincent said, "She calls him." They set it up in 20 minutes. Lauren's phone, her voice, her terms except Gabriel's tech handled the trace on the back end, quiet and invisible. She sat at the kitchen table with the phone in front of her and the two men standing off to the side where they could hear but not be heard, and she dialed Derek's number. He answered on the second ring. Lauren. His voice was carefully calibrated, warm enough to suggest he'd been worried, controlled enough to suggest he was still in charge of this conversation. "Where are you?" "I've been." "I know you called the estate," she said. A pause, short but real. "What?" "You called the Meridia estate this morning," she said. "You asked for Vincent by name. You offered information about a mutual problem." She kept her voice level, not cold level. "That's a very specific set of moves for a man who told me last night that he wanted to apologize." Derek recalibrated. She could hear it. "Lauren, I'm going to ask you a question," she said. "And I need you to answer it honestly, because how you answer it determines what happens next for both of us." She paused. "How long have you been working with Raymond Voss?" The silence this time was longer. In it, she heard the specific sound of a man deciding whether to lie or redirect. She'd heard it before in depositions, in interviews, in conversations with people who'd been caught, but hadn't yet admitted it to themselves. "I don't know who that is," Derek said. "Raymond Voss," Lauren said. "He manages financial operations for several businesses connected to the Moretti organization. One of those businesses, Lakeview Consulting Solutions, shares a registered agent address with DRS Capital Partners, the company whose loan you guaranteed with my identity." She paused. "I'm going to ask you one more time. How long?" Another silence. Then Derek's voice changed. The warmth went out of it entirely, and what was underneath it was exactly what she'd always suspected was there. A cold, practical calculation. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for," he said. "Most people are," Lauren said. "Lauren." His tone shifted again now, something between threat and negotiation. The voice of someone who'd assessed the board and decided intimidation was the more efficient play. "You need to understand something. You're in that house right now, and being in that house makes you part of something that is much larger than a wrong number and a bad anniversary dinner. The people I work with have been very patient. That patience has a limit." "Tell me about the limit," she said. 48 hours, Derek said. "The transfers go through. Your name is on the documents. At that point, it doesn't matter what you know or what you found in whatever file you've been reading. You become part of the paper trail, and the paper trail points exactly where it was designed to point." He paused. "Come to me. Bring whatever you copied. We make an arrangement and your name disappears from everything. Nobody ever has to know you were in that house." Lauren looked across the kitchen at Vincent, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't entirely read. "Where?" she said. Derek gave her an address, a parking garage on the south side, public enough to seem safe, private enough to be anything but. He said 11 o'clock. He said to come alone. "I'll be there," Lauren said, and hung up. The kitchen was very quiet. "He's giving you a time and a location," Gabriel said carefully. "That's not what someone does when they want to negotiate." "No," Lauren agreed. "It's what someone does when they want to control the environment." She looked at the address she'd written on the notepad. "He's not going to be alone. Raymond's people will be there." "Then you're not going," Vincent said. His voice had that particular quality, not loud, not dramatic, but with the weight of a decision already made. Lauren recognized it from the night before in the hall, when he'd taken the phone call about Raymond. That voice was the one he used when he had stopped weighing options and started moving. She turned to face him. "I'm going," she said, "but not the way he's expecting." "He needs me there," she said. "Specifically me, specifically in person. That means I have something he needs, which means I have leverage he doesn't know I have." She leaned forward. "If I don't show, he moves the timeline. The transfers go through, my name is on the documents, and we spend the next 6 months fighting a legal battle with fabricated evidence." She spread her hands. "If I go with backup, with a plan, with everything I've found recorded and copied in 3 different places, then we control what I walks into instead of the other way around." Gabriel said to no one in particular, "She's right." Vincent looked at him. Gabriel had the expression of a man who was used to being the most tactically clear person in any room and had just encountered competition. "She's right," Gabriel said again, more directly. "The location is controllable. If we go in first, stage it correctly, it becomes our environment, not his." Vincent looked at Lauren for a long moment. You understand what it means if something goes wrong in that garage. I understand exactly what it means, she said, which is why we're going to make sure nothing goes wrong. She said it the way she said everything, without performance, without drama, with the quiet certainty of someone has looked at a problem from every angle and arrived at the only solution that works. She was afraid. She wasn't going to pretend otherwise, not to herself. But the fear was clean, not the paralyzing kind. Not the kind that came from being a situation someone else controlled. This was the fear of choosing a difficult thing and knowing you've chosen it with your eyes open. They spent the next 2 hours preparing. Gabriel coordinated his people positions in and around the garage, communication protocols, extraction routes. Lauren went back through everything she'd compiled the night before and transferred the most critical documents to a secure cloud account she created specifically for this, one connected to neither her regular email nor any account Derek had ever had access to. She also did something she hadn't mentioned to Vincent yet. She called Naomi. Naomi answered on the first ring. Lauren, tell me everything, right now. I need you to do something for me, Lauren said. Not dangerous, completely legal, but important. Tell me. Lauren gave her the account credentials for the cloud folder. The documents inside, she explained, connected Derek Sloan, a man named Raymond Voss, a shell company called Lakeview Consulting Solutions, and a fraudulent loan structure to a money laundering operation running through legitimate Moretti business accounts. She told Naomi that if she didn't receive a check-in call by 2 o'clock this afternoon, she was authorized to send the full document package to 3 specific contacts. Lauren's supervising forensic investigator at work, the Financial Crimes Division of the Illinois Attorney General's office, and a journalist Naomi knew personally who covered financial crime for the Tribune. Lauren, Naomi said quietly. Are you safe right now? Yes, Lauren said. But I need a safety net that isn't just the people in this house. You have it, Naomi said without hesitation. Then who are the people in this house? I'll explain when I see you, Lauren said. 2 o'clock. Don't miss it. She hung up, turned around. Vincent was standing in the doorway of the kitchen, and from she wasn't sure how long he'd been there or how much he'd heard. You built a dead man's switch, he said. I built a safety net, she said, for both of us. If this goes wrong, those documents surface through legal channels. Raymond and Derek's operation gets exposed regardless. Your name is in there too, but the framing is different. You're the victim of the financial fraud, not the architect. She met his eyes. It's in everyone's interest for this afternoon to go right. He was quiet for a moment. You don't trust me. I trust you enough to be here, Lauren said. But I've spent 3 years trusting one person completely, and look where that got me. I'm not doing that again. Not with you. Not with anyone. Not yet. She picked up the legal pad. That's not an insult. That's just honesty. He held her gaze for a moment longer. Then he said, fair enough. And she knew, from the way he said it, not wounded, not performatively gracious, just plain and direct, that it was. At 10:15, they left for the garage. Lauren rode with Gabriel. Vincent followed in a separate vehicle, which had been her specific requirement. She needed to walk into that space as herself, not as someone arriving under obvious armed escort. Gabriel argued it briefly. She held the point. She'd learned in 3 years with Derek exactly how much space to take up in an argument and when to hold it. She held it. In the car, Gabriel said, if at any point you feel the situation is outside your control, you say the word compromise. That's the signal everyone moves. Understood, she said. Mr. Moretti will be inside the structure, Gabriel said. North stairwell, 3rd level. He'll have eyes on the 2nd level where you'll be meeting Sloan. He insisted, she said. It wasn't a question, he insisted. Gabriel confirmed. Lauren looked out the window at Chicago moving past. The rain from last night was completely gone. The city in the morning light looked cleaned and sharp, the way it always did after a storm, like something that had gone through something difficult and come out the other side still standing. She thought about the message she'd sent last night to the wrong number. The message she'd typed with shaking hands after 3 years of holding herself inside someone else's definition of acceptable. I'm finished being the woman you remember only when you need something. She had meant it for Derek. It had reached Vincent instead. And somehow, in the gap between those two men, she had found her way back to herself, not because either of them had given her anything she didn't already have, but because one of them had, finally and simply, listened. She was not going to this garage for Vincent Moretti. She was not going for Derek, or to prove something, or because someone had told her she should. She was going because her name was on those documents, because her future was in that paper trail, because 3 years ago she had started letting someone else make the decisions, and it had ended with cold pasta and a wrong number, and 2 days before her financial identity was used as a weapon. She was going because she was done letting other people decide what happened to her. The garage came into view. Gabriel slowed the car. "Ready?" he said. Lauren picked up her phone, checked that the recording app was running, and put it in her coat pocket. "Let's go," she said. She got out of the car, crossed the sidewalk, and walked through the entrance into the concrete dark toward the sound of footsteps that were already waiting on the level above. The second level of the garage smelled like oil and cold concrete. Lauren's footsteps were steady. She counted them without meaning, to a habit from years of walking into rooms where she didn't know what she was walking into, where the counting gave her mind something to hold while the rest of her assessed the space. Derek was already there. He was standing near the center of the level, hands in his coat pockets, and he looked exactly like himself, which was the most disorienting thing about him. He always looked reasonable. That had always been the problem. He had the face of a man you trusted before he gave you a reason to, and he knew how to wear it. But he was not alone. Two men stood behind him and slightly to the left. Lauren clocked them immediately, the way they held themselves, the angle of their attention, the absence of any pretense that they were there casually. She kept walking. She did not break stride. She had decided in the car that the worst thing she could do was let her body betray what her mind was doing. Stopped 6 feet from Derek. "You actually came," he said. Something between relief and calculation moved across his face. "Thank God. Listen, I know how this looks." "Don't," she said quietly. He stopped. "Don't do the thing where you tell me how it looks," she said. "I know how it looks. I've known how it looks since 2 o'clock this morning. I'm not here for your explanation." Derek glanced at the men behind him, a quick check, barely a flicker, but she caught it. "Then why are you here?" "Because my name is on your documents," Lauren said, "and I want it off." He nodded slowly. The calculation in his expression sharpened into something almost like respect, the particular respect that people like Derek felt for situations they believed they still controlled. "That's reasonable," he said. "That's something we can work out. But I need you to give me whatever you copied from the estate. All of it. You do that, your name disappears from everything. 48 hours, the transfers go through. You walk away clean." "And Vincent," she said. Derek's expression shifted. "That's not your problem to manage. You made it my problem," she said. "When you put my name on documents designed to point investigators toward Lauren." His voice dropped, and for a moment, just a moment, she heard the version of him she'd actually loved, or thought she had. The one who could sound warm and sincere and entirely present. It was the most dangerous version. "You don't understand what you've walked into. These people are not—" "I understand exactly what I've walked into," she said. "What I don't think you understand is how much I found last night." She reached into her coat and produced a folded set of papers, copies she'd prepared specifically for this moment. "Lakeview Consulting Solutions. Registered agent address shared with DRS Capital Partners. 37 false vendor transactions over 8 weeks, totaling approximately $400,000. Coded communication records between you and Raymond Voss, dating back to at least March." She held the papers out. "Would you like to keep going?" The color left Derek's face. Not dramatically, he was too controlled for that. But she saw it the way a photographer sees the light change. Behind him, one of the two men took a step forward. Lauren did not move. "Where did you get those?" Derek said. His voice had lost its warmth entirely. "I found them," she said. "Because that's what I do. You spent 3 years watching me work, and you never actually understood what the work was." She pulled the papers back. "I trace money, I follow the gaps. I find what people believed they'd hidden well enough." She met his eyes. "You didn't hide this well enough." The man who had stepped forward spoke for the first time. He was heavier than Derek, older, with the specific stillness of someone for whom threat was a professional posture rather than an emotional one. "Miss Hayes," he said, "you should understand that the documents you're holding are copies. The originals are already in transit. Your name is already attached. What you do in the next 10 minutes determines whether that attachment becomes a problem for you or not." She looked at him steadily. "And you are?" "Someone who would like this resolved quietly," he said. "Raymond Voss." She'd never seen his face, but she'd spent 12 hours studying his financial signature, and the way this man spoke, the precision, the calibration, the specific vocabulary of someone who managed complex systems confirmed it. She said. A pause. He hadn't expected her to know. You built something impressive, Lauren said, and she meant it without complimenting him. The vendor account layering, the shell company structure, the coded notation in the operational memos, that sophisticated work. It took me a while to see the full shape of it. She paused. The problem is that once you see the shape, you can't unsee it. And I've had about 12 hours. Raymond looked at Derek. Derek looked at Lauren. Something had happened in his face. The last of the warmth was gone. And what was underneath it was something she'd glimpsed before, on the worst nights, and had always found reasons to reinterpret. She wasn't going to reinterpret it now. Take her phone, Derek said. The second man moved faster than she expected. She turned, stepped back, but the space was wrong, and he was quick. Her phone was out of her coat pocket before she could fully pivot, and she felt the cold, practical finality of that loss as a physical thing. The recording app was running, but the phone was gone. Her heart rate spiked. She controlled it. This was always how it went, the moment when the situation showed its real shape, when the pretense of negotiation fell away, and what was left was simple and hard and required a different kind of thinking. She said nothing. She did not reach for the phone. She stood in the center of the level and looked at Raymond Voss and waited. Where's the cloud backup? Raymond said. I don't know what you mean, she said. Lauren. Derek's voice had gone flat in a way she'd never quite heard from him before. This isn't a moment to be clever. Tell him where the backup is. I don't have a backup, she said. Raymond took 3 steps toward her. Not threatening in the conventional sense, he didn't raise his hand, didn't touch her, didn't make any gesture that could be called physical. But he closed the distance in a way that was entirely about power, the reduction of space, as a statement about who controlled the terms. You spent the night in that study, he said. You went through the ledgers. You're a forensic accounting assistant. You don't have a backup. He studied her face. Where are you sending the documents? I already sent them, she said. The silence that followed was the loudest silence she'd ever stood in. Raymond looked at Derek. Derek looked at the man who'd taken her phone, as if the phone's existence might somehow retroactively prevent the things she'd just described. Raymond looked back at Lauren, to whom he said, not a question, a demand. To people who will know to open them if I don't check in by 2 o'clock, she said. Financial Crimes Division. A journalist. My supervising investigator, she kept her voice steady. You have about 3.5 hours before this stops being a private conversation and becomes a matter of public record. Whatever you were planning to do in this garage, I'd think carefully about what it costs you. For the first time, Raymond Voss looked uncertain. Derek did not look uncertain. He looked at her the way she'd seen him look when she caught him in a lie, and he decided that aggression was a better play than remorse. He took 2 steps toward her, his hand closed around her arm. Listen to me very carefully, he said. You are going to call whoever you sent those to and tell them it was a mistake. You are going to do it right now on speaker, with Raymond listening. And then you're going to sit down and wait while we figure out how to manage this. Do you understand me? She looked at his hand on her arm. Then she looked at his face. 3 years. 3 years of this hand, this face, this voice that managed and directed and decided. 3 years of the small surrenders that had added up to a woman who no longer recognized herself in the mirror. The woman who had made lemon cream pasta on an anniversary and stood at the counter for 40 minutes, waiting for a man who was somewhere else, with someone else, not even bothering to pretend he was coming home. No, she said. Derek's grip tightened. Lauren, I said no. She had practiced this, in the abstract, in the way you practice things you hope you'll never need. Gabriel had shown her, in the 45 minutes between leaving the estate and arriving here, 3 specific things. Not because he expected her to need them both, he and Vincent had argued, with varying degrees of intensity, that she should not be in this position at all. But because she had insisted, and Gabriel had understood from their conversation the night before, that Lauren Hayes did not make decisions without preparing for the consequences. She used the first one. Derek's grip broke, and he stepped back surprised more than hurt, but the surprise was enough, and the space it created was exactly what she needed. She put 3 feet between herself and him, and turned so her back was to the exterior wall, rather than to the center of the level. Compromise, she said clearly, not loudly but clearly. For a half second, nothing happened. The word hung in the concrete air, and Derek stared at her, and Raymond made a decision that was visible on his face, the decision to stop waiting and start managing. And then the north stairwell door opened. Vincent came through it first. She had specifically asked him to hold position at the 3rd level. He had specifically agreed. He was here anyway. And in a different moment, she would have been angry about that. But the specific quality of his presence that contained, particular force of a man who had spent his entire adult life making rooms change when he entered them shifted the temperature of the level immediately and completely. Gabriel came through the same door with two men. The second stairwell, the one on the south side, opened at the same moment, and two more men came through that one. They positioned themselves without drama, without hurry, with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this in worse places. Raymond Voss looked at the room he was now standing in. The room that had, in the span of 20 seconds, become an entirely different room than the one he'd prepared. Derek let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Almost. Moretti, he said. I was wondering when you were going to show up. Vincent crossed the level without responding to Derek. He stopped next to Lauren, close enough that she was aware of him without feeling enclosed. It was a precise piece of positioning present without possessive, which she suspected had cost him something given his instincts. Are you hurt? He said to her only. No, she said. He looked at Derek then. Whatever he communicated in that look, it was not loud and it was not theatrical. It was simply the look of a man who has made a complete assessment and is no longer weighing options. You called my house this morning, Vincent said. Derek adjusted. He was good at adjusting, she had to give him that. His whole affect shifted, recalibrating for an audience that had changed. Vincent, there's a reasonable resolution here. Lauren has documents that belong to... They don't belong to you, Vincent said. Let me ask you something. He took one step forward. Raymond told you to put her name on those accounts. When did he tell you? March, Lauren said. She was watching Raymond. The communications records put the first contact between them in the first week of March, which is approximately 6 weeks after you and I had the first conversation about your business expansion. She looked at Derek. You were already inside this before you told me about the loan. You were placed inside my life specifically for this. Derek opened his mouth, closed it. He's right, Raymond said. The word landed like something physical. Everyone looked at Raymond. He was not looking at Derek. He was looking at Vincent, and the look was the look of a man who had run the numbers on a situation and arrived at a conclusion about the most viable remaining path. Derek is a tool, Raymond said flatly, without heat. He was useful. He's not useful anymore. His attention was on Vincent entirely now. What I have is more than documents, Vincent. I have 7 years of operational records. Financial, logistical, contractual. Records that put your name on everything this organization has done since your father died. You can take this room tonight, but you can't not take back what's already in transit. The level was completely still. I know, Vincent said. Raymond blinked. Just once. Then you know there's no version of this where you walk away clean. There's one version, Lauren said. Raymond looked at her. He'd been dismissing her since the moment she'd spoken his name. She could feel it, the way you feel the particular weight of being underestimated, not as an insult, but as a tactical fact. He had assessed her as a civilian, an accidental variable, a woman who had wandered into something too large for her and was now trying to manage her exit. She reached into the inside pocket of her coat. She produced a second folder. This is not the folder you've been trying to take from me, she said. The documents in my coat pocket were copies. What I'm holding now is something different. She opened the folder to the first page and turned it outward so Raymond could see it. This is the account structure for Voss Capital Managers, LLC, a company registered in Delaware in your wife's maiden name, which does not appear anywhere in the Moretti operational records because you've been running it completely separately. She turned to the second page. These are the accounts at 3 separate institutions where the $400,000 from the vendor fraud was before being split into 18 smaller deposits, none of which went into any account connected to the Moretti organization. She looked at him steadily. You weren't stealing from Vincent to give to Castellano. You were stealing from Vincent for yourself. And you were going to let Castellano do the dirty work of taking him down while you were already gone with the money. Raymond Voss's face did something she hadn't seen it do yet. It went still in a completely different way than it had been still, before not the stillness of control, but the stillness of a man standing on ground that had just revealed itself as hollow. The records you're giving Castellano, Lauren continued, don't just implicate Vincent, they implicate you. Because I found the trail, Mr. Voss. All of it. And I've put together a document that separates your personal operation from the Moretti organization's operations clearly enough that any competent prosecutor can see exactly which transactions belong to which person. She paused. You plan to disappear. The people you were selling Vincent to don't know that yet. Behind Raymond, his two men looked at each other. That was the moment. She'd been waiting for it, the fracture. Not between Raymond and Vincent, not between Derek and anyone, but between Raymond and the men he'd brought with him. Men who, she had correctly guessed from the ledger patterns, had themselves been underpaid for months while Raymond skimmed from the top. Men who had been told they were serving an organization, but had been, in practice, serving Raymond Voss's private exit strategy. He's been taking from you too, she said to them. Directly. No performance, no drama, just the numbers. Account ending in 7,734. Payments listed as security operational costs. Those payments were going to a shell account, not to any of you. 14 months. Roughly 2,000 per month, per man. That should have reached you and didn't. One of Raymond's men took a step back. The other looked at Raymond. Raymond turned. That's not account statements are in the folder, Lauren said. I can wait. Derek chose this moment to move. She had almost forgotten about him, which was exactly the kind of mistake he'd always relied on, her attention redirecting elsewhere long enough for him to reposition. He was quick and he was heading toward the south stairwell, and he had apparently decided that the viable path here was the one where he was no longer in this garage. He made it approximately 8 feet. Gabriel was faster. Derek sat down on the concrete without a great deal of ceremony, and Gabriel stood over him with the particular expression of a man who had been professionally patient for several hours and had now run out of patience. Don't, Gabriel said simply. Raymond was still looking at his men. His men were looking at the folder. The situation had the quality of a structure that has lost its central beam still standing technically, but the stillness was the stillness of something about to shift. Vincent looked at Raymond. Give me the transit information. The records you're sending to Castellano, call it back. I'll do what I've already decided to do, Vincent said, which has nothing to do with this garage and everything to do with what comes after. He took one slow step forward. You've known me for 11 years, Raymond. You knew my father. You know that when I make a decision, I've already thought through every version of the conversation you're about to try to have with me. He stopped. Call it back. Give me the account information for the money you moved, and I'll let the law handle the rest. Raymond stared at him. You're serious. You'd rather use the law than... Raymond stopped himself, looked at Lauren. Something complicated moved across his face. This is her. This is me, Vincent said. She just helped me see it clearly. The truth of that statement was so plain and so unexpectedly simple that it seemed to take Raymond by surprise, the genuine surprise this time, not the performed kind. He stood in the middle of the garage looking at the man he'd worked for and against for 11 years. And he looked, for the first time, his age. He gave them the transit information. Gabriel recorded it. Vincent made one call and the data transfer was intercepted at the server level before it reached anyone in Castellano's network. Lauren watched the whole sequence happen with the particular satisfaction of watching a structure fall in exactly the direction you'd calculated. Then she sat down on the hood of the nearest car because her legs had decided they'd been professional long enough and were now going to be honest. Vincent was beside her in 3 steps. Not touching her, just present, close enough that the presence was deliberate. You okay, he said. Give me 30 seconds, she said. He gave her 30 seconds. She used them to breathe, to let her nervous system understand that the part that required performance was over and it could stop running at maximum capacity. She thought about the recording device in her watch still running. She confirmed with a glance, and the cloud folder Naomi was holding, and the fact that Derek was currently sitting on a concrete floor, being managed by Gabriel, and the fact that Raymond Voss had just handed over the information that would unravel 18 months of careful criminal architecture. The watch, she said. It's been recording this entire time. Vincent looked at the watch, then back at her. Of course it has. I didn't tell you about it. I noticed it this morning, he said. I decided that was your business. She looked at him. He looked back, and the look had none of the performance she'd seen in the first half of their first conversation, none of the careful management of what she was allowed to see. Just a man who was tired and had made a difficult choice and was sitting with it. You chose my strategy, she said, in there. When you could have... Yes, he said. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Not the managed quiet, the real kind. Because you were right, he said. A body doesn't end this. Evidence ends this. And he stopped. Started again. Because I've been making decisions the same way for 20 years, and they've left me alone in a room at midnight, answering a stranger's wrong number text. He looked at his hands. Maybe that's an argument for trying something different. The garage around them had become organized. Gabriel's people moving, Derek being escorted, Raymond standing in a controlled stillness that had a different quality than all his earlier controlled stillness. Lauren watched it all and felt the peculiar double sensation of a crisis ending and a future opening, simultaneously, without a clear border between them. My name. The transfer documents. Frozen as of 9 this morning, Vincent said. I had the accounts flagged before we left. The 48-hour window is closed. She exhaled, all the way. She hadn't let herself feel how much she'd been carrying, that the specific dread of her own name being used against her. The financial future she'd built carefully, quietly, over years, being dismantled by a man who'd never understood what it had cost her to build it. She felt it now, in the absence of it, the way you only fully understand the weight of something when you set it down. Derek was on his feet now, hands held by Gabriel's people. He looked at Lauren across the distance between them, and she saw the full range of what was in his face: anger, calculation, and underneath both of those, something smaller and more honest that she thought might be shame. Not remorse. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the specific shame of having been seen completely, of having your private architecture exposed to daylight. Lauren, he said. She looked at him. For what it's worth, he said. And then he stopped, because apparently it was not worth very much, and he didn't have language for it. It's not, she said simply. Not cruelly, just honestly. Not right now. She slid off the hood of the car. She picked up her legal pad. She'd brought it, tucked under her arm, because she was done leaving her work behind when she left a room. She looked at Gabriel. The watch recording needs to go to whoever's handling the legal handoff. Already planned, Gabriel said. She looked at Vincent. I need to call Naomi before 2 o'clock. You have 3 hours, he said. I know. I'm calling her now anyway. She found her phone. Gabriel had retrieved it from the man who'd taken it, a fact she hadn't seen happen, but was grateful for, and opened her contacts. She's going to want to talk for a long time. Vincent smiled. It was a small thing, and slightly asymmetrical, and it was the most unguarded expression she'd seen on his face. Tell her the city in the comments is Chicago, he said. Lauren looked at him. What? It's a joke, he said. A bad one. Very bad, she agreed. And she walked toward the stairwell to call her best friend, and she did not look back, because she was done being the woman who looked back to check whether she was still wanted. She already knew the answer, and more importantly, she had stopped needing it to determine where she stood. Outside, Chicago was in full November daylight, cold, clear. The lake somewhere to the east, moving the way it always moved, without concern for what happened at its edges. Lauren stood on the sidewalk with her phone to her ear and listened to it ring, and felt the particular lightness of a person who has walked through something genuinely difficult and come out on the other side still recognizably themselves. Naomi picked up on the second ring. Tell me everything, Naomi said. Start from the beginning and do not leave anything out. It's a long story, Lauren said. I've got all day. Lauren looked back at the garage entrance, where Gabriel's people were organizing a situation that had, 20 minutes ago, been several kinds of dangerous. She thought about the ledger on the desk the night before, the wrong number, the cold pasta, the blue dress she was still wearing. She thought about a man who had answered a stranger's heartbreak at midnight with something honest, and who had, when it came down to it, made a choice she had not been entirely sure he would make. All right, she said to Naomi, but I'm going to need you to listen without interrupting for at least the first 10 minutes. Naomi said, Lauren, I have never successfully not interrupted you for 10 consecutive minutes in 20 years of friendship. I know, Lauren said. I'm asking anyway. She started talking. And Chicago moved around her, the way cities move around every ordinary, extraordinary thing that happens inside them without ceremony, without pause, just the constant forward motion of a place that has seen everything and will see more. She talked for a long time. The arrest warrants came through on a Tuesday. Lauren found out the way she found out most things now, not from a phone call, not from someone delivering news to her door, but from her own work. She was at her desk at 7:15 in the morning, 3 weeks after the garage, reviewing a set of account statements for a new client, a retired school teacher from Evanston, whose identity had been stolen and used to open 11 credit lines she'd never applied for, when Gabriel's name appeared on her phone screen. She answered. Derek Sloan was taken into custody at 6 this morning, Gabriel said. Federal charges: identity theft, wire fraud, criminal conspiracy. A pause. Raymond Voss surrendered at 7. His attorney negotiated the terms last night. Several of his associates have already agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. Lauren set down her pen. She sat with that for a moment, not celebrating, not exhaling in the dramatic way she'd imagined she would when this day came. Just sitting with the quiet, solid fact of it. My name, she said. Fully cleared, Gabriel said. The fraudulent debt is frozen. The documents with your name on them have been flagged as fabricated evidence in the federal filing. Your financial record is clean. She closed her eyes. Okay, she said. Okay, Gabriel said, and she could hear something in his voice that might have been amusement if Gabriel allowed himself such things. Thank you, Gabriel, she said, for everything. A pause. You did most of it, he said simply, and hung up. She sat at her desk for another 3 minutes, doing nothing, just breathing, just letting the weight of the last 3 weeks settle into something she could carry comfortably, rather than something she was bracing against constantly. Then she picked up her pen and went back to the schoolteacher from Evanston's account statements, because the work didn't stop for relief, and she had learned, was still learning, that this was actually a good thing. The work had always been there. She had just spent 3 years letting someone convince her it was less important than keeping the peace. She called Naomi at 8. Naomi already knew. She had Google alerts set on both names and had been texting into the void since 6:30. A fact that became clear when Lauren's screen lit up with 17 unread messages the moment she opened her messages app. I've been trying to reach you for 2 hours, Naomi said when she picked up. I was working, Lauren said. You were Lauren. Derek got arrested. I know. You know. You know. Lauren Christine Hayes, the man who used your identity for criminal purposes and then tried to use you as a human shield in a parking garage, got arrested this morning. And your response is, I know, I was working. I finished the Evanston file first, Lauren said. A silence on Naomi's end that was equal parts exasperation and something warmer. You are the most okay. Yes, Lauren said, and meant it completely. Like actually okay, or okay the way you were okay for the last year of your relationship with Derek, where you kept saying you were fine, and I kept knowing you weren't. Actually okay, Lauren said, the real kind. Another silence. Then quietly, good. I'm really glad, Lauren, I know you are. She looked at the school teacher's file on her desk. I need to ask you something, anything. The organization I've been building, Lauren said. The fraud recovery consulting firm. I want you to run operations. Not as a favor, not informally, I mean officially. Partner level. Salary, equity, the whole thing. She paused. I talked to a lawyer last week. The recovered assets from Raymond's network cleared federal seizure review. A significant portion is being returned to the fraud victims his operation targeted. I've been authorized to administer a recovery program. It needs someone who is extremely competent and completely trustworthy, and who already knows where everything is filed. The silence this time was different. Lauren had known Naomi for 20 years. She knew every variety of her silences. This one meant she was trying not to cry. Naomi, Lauren said. I'm not crying, Naomi said. I know, I'm just yes, obviously yes. Lauren, obviously yes. Good, Lauren said. Come in Thursday. I'll have the paperwork ready. She hung up, and for the first time all morning, she smiled. Not a managed smile, not a performed one, the real kind, the kind that arrives before you've decided to allow it. She went back to work. The firm occupied a small office suite on the 14th floor of a building in the Loop, nothing ostentatious, nothing that announced itself. 3 rooms, her name on the frosted glass door, 2 junior analysts she'd hired from her old firm, and 1 paralegal who had come recommended by the forensic accounting network she'd spent years building, while Derek told her she was wasting her time on professional relationships. The Recovered Assets Program was funded through a federal framework. Lauren had spent 6 weeks negotiating, and the setup was structured so that no single entity, including Vincent Moretti's former businesses, had any administrative authority over how the money was deployed. She had been specific about that from the beginning, with everyone, including Vincent. He had not argued. She had half expected him, to the instinct, to maintain some form of structural connection, some thread of influence over something she was building. Instead, he had said, tell me how you want it structured, and I'll have my attorneys document it that way. And he had. And then he had not mentioned it again. That had been the first indication that something was genuinely different. The second had been harder to identify because it didn't announce itself. It was a pattern of small things. He called when he said he would, and for the length of time that was appropriate, not beyond it. He asked questions about her work and actually listened to the answers. When she said she wasn't ready for something dinner at the estate, a longer commitment, Anything that pulled her too far, too fast into a life that was still being rebuilt. He said fine and meant it. Not the performative fine that Derek had used, which was a pause before a campaign. Just fine, just acceptance. She started noticing it after the third week, started trusting it after the fifth. 6 weeks after the garage, she met him for dinner at a restaurant she had chosen, on a night she had proposed. Not the estate, not his territory. Neutral ground, which he accepted without comment. She wore her own clothes, not the blue dress, which she had not touched since that night, and was fairly certain she was never going to touch again. She arrived first and ordered water, and sat at the table she'd requested, which faced the door, and watched him walk in. He looked different outside the estate, more like a person, she thought, and then recognized that this was probably what he'd always been, and she'd been seeing him through the lens of everything she'd been told to expect. He sat down across from her, ordered coffee, and looked at her with the particular directness she'd come to recognize as his baseline, not performance, just attention. You look like something good happened today, he said. Naomi officially joined the firm, Lauren said. We celebrated with bad takeout in the office. That's the best kind of celebration, he said. It is, she agreed. They talked through dinner the way they'd talked in the study that first night, without the social scaffolding that most early conversations required. The small talk that exists to establish safety before anyone says anything real. They had skipped that step entirely, under circumstances that left no room for it, and neither of them had found a reason to go back and install it. She told him about the Evanston case, about the school teacher who'd lost her retirement savings to a layered identity theft operation and had been fighting to have it recognized for 14 months before Lauren's firm took the case. He listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he said, "What does it take to undo that kind of damage? Legally." Time, Lauren said. Documentation. Someone who knows which agencies to contact in which order and doesn't give up when the first 3 doors don't open. She looked at him. That's mostly what I do. I'm a very persistent door knocker. He smiled at that. The asymmetrical one, the real one. I know, he said. She set down her fork. How are the shipping companies? The transition of Moretti Maritime into independently audited management had been the subject of, according to Gabriel's careful reports, significant resistance from various quarters. She had been following the process from a distance, the way you follow something you're invested in, but no longer responsible for with attention, without ownership. Complicated, Vincent said. We lost 3 major contracts when the transition became public. 2 rival organizations sent messages that were not subtle. He picked up his coffee. And I had to have a very long conversation with a federal mediator about the specific terms of the information I provided about the corrupt officials. Did it go the way you needed it to? Lauren said. It went the way it needed to go, he said, which is different. She heard what was in that, the distinction between what you want and what the situation requires, and the particular cost of choosing the situation's requirements over your own. She had spent 3 years making that choice in the wrong direction, for the wrong person. She recognized it differently now. You're losing money, she said. I'm losing money, he confirmed, in territory. And people who were loyal to you because of the way things were. He looked at her across the table. All of that, he said. Yes. Are you okay? She said. The question landed simply, not dramatically. She was not asking whether the business was sustainable or the legal strategy was sound. She was asking the human question, the one that had been underneath every conversation they'd had since the night she walked into his house. He was quiet for a moment. I'm better than I expected to be, he said, which surprises me. He set down the coffee. I thought losing those things would feel like losing everything. It doesn't. He paused. I think I had confused control with stability for a long time. Most people do, Lauren said. Did you? He said. With Derek? She thought about it honestly. Yes, she said. I confused his certainty for security. He was always sure about everything, and I was always second-guessing myself. And somewhere along the way, I decided that his certainty was the solid ground and my doubts were the problem. She shook her head. They weren't the problem. The doubts were accurate. They were me paying attention. What changed, he said. The photograph? No, Lauren said. The photograph was proof. What changed was the text I sent after it. The one I stopped editing. She looked at him steadily. I had written a dozen versions of that text over 3 years. Safe versions. Diplomatic versions. Versions that gave him room to deny it and me room to accept the denial. She paused. That night I just wrote what was true. And I sent it before I could make it smaller. Vincent held her gaze. and it went to the wrong number. And it went to the wrong number, she said. And the wrong number answered honestly. And I drove through the rain to a stranger's house because for once I wanted to make a decision that Derek had no part in. She was quiet for a moment. I wasn't running toward you. I want you to know that. I was running toward myself. He nodded once. Slowly. I know, he said. That's why I let you set the terms from the beginning. Is that why? She said. That and because you were genuinely frightening, he said. And the tone was dry, and the asymmetrical smile was there again. And she laughed, actually laughed. The real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere unguarded. They finished dinner. They walked out into the Chicago evening together, and the city moved around them the way it always did, indifferent and enormous and full. He did not take her hand without asking. She was aware of his presence beside her, and the awareness was not the anxious kind, not the constant monitoring she'd done with Derek, the reading of his mood to gauge her own acceptable range. This was something different, something that felt like choice, open at both ends. I'm not moving into the estate, she said as they walked. I know, he said. I'm not going to be a part of your world in any way that compromises what I'm building. I know, and I'm not ready to say what this is yet, specifically. I need more time to trust myself. He stopped walking. She stopped too, turned to face him. He looked at her with the same attention he'd given her from the first conversation, the genuine kind, the kind that doesn't perform itself. Lauren, he said, I'm not asking for a definition. I'm not asking for a timeline. I'm not asking you to move in or give up anything or be any particular thing. He paused. I spent 20 years building a structure around myself so that nothing could get to me. It worked, and I was completely alone inside it. He held her gaze. I don't want the structure anymore. I just want to be able to call you on a Tuesday and tell you something true and have you tell me something back. She looked at him for a long moment. That I can do, she said. 1 year after the night of the wrong number, firm occupied a full floor of the building in the Loop. 3 more analysts had joined. The Recovered Assets program had assisted 61 fraud victims in the prior 12 months, recovered identities, cleared fraudulent debts, navigated the bureaucratic labyrinths that most people couldn't survive alone. Naomi ran the operations with a precision and a warmth that Lauren had always known she was capable of, but had never seen deployed at full strength before. The firm was not large, it was not flashy. It was exactly what Lauren had always been: precise, persistent, paying attention. On a Sunday morning in November, a year to the week from the night of the anniversary dinner, she was sitting at her kitchen table in her own apartment, the new one, the one she'd chosen after leaving the old one behind, when she found the cracked old phone in the bottom of a box she hadn't fully unpacked. She held it in both hands and looked at the screen. The crack across the corner was the same. The battery was dead. She found a charger that fit, let it run for 10 minutes, and turned it on. The messages loaded slowly. Old threads. Naomi's long voice note chains. A few from her mother. And there, near the top of the list, the thread she'd almost forgotten the phone number for. The breakup text still visible on the screen, word for word. She read it the way you read something you wrote when you were a different version of yourself, with recognition and distance at the same time. She was still reading it when her actual phone rang. The new one on the counter beside her. Vincent, she answered. It's early, she said. I know, he said. I've been up for a while. Working? Cooking, he said. Which means I can't sleep, which you already know. I know, she said. She was still looking at the old phone. I found something this morning. What? The text, she said. The one I sent you by mistake. A brief silence. What does it look like reading it now? He said. She thought about it, honestly. Like someone who was done being managed, she said. Like someone who had a lot of anger and a lot of grief and sent them both out into the dark without knowing where they were going. They went to me, he said. They did, she said. Are you sorry? No, she said without hesitation. Not for any of it. Not even the parts that were hard. She heard him exhale a small sound, unguarded. I told Gabriel this morning that I thought I owed you an apology, Vincent said, for what I replied that night. Come over. I'll make you forget him. Arrogant, she said. Extremely, he agreed. And also, she said, it worked. Just not the way you meant it. A pause. Then what do you mean? I didn't forget Derek, she said. I never forgot what happened. But I stopped letting it be the thing that defined what came after. She set the old phone down on the table. That's different from forgetting. That's choosing. The morning light came through the window the way it did on clear November days, in Chicago, sharp and particular, not warm but present. She sat at her own table in her own kitchen in her own apartment and felt the specific solidity of a life that was hers in a way it hadn't been before. "I have groceries," Vincent said. "I was going to cook." "At the estate," she said. "I could come to you," he said. "If you want, I'll bring everything. You cook, I'll manage the dishes. We can argue about whether the lemon cream pasta is better than what I make." "It is better," she said. "You've never actually tried mine. I've had a year of evidence about your cooking." "One meal doesn't constitute." "Come over." A pause. Then quietly, "Yeah?" "Yeah," she said. "Come over." She hung up and sat for a moment in the quiet of a Sunday morning with the old cracked phone on the table in front of her, and the new one still warm in her hand. She thought about the woman who had typed that message a year ago, shaking hands. Cold pasta, blue dress, the long accumulation of small surrenders, finally reaching the point where the weight of them was greater than the fear of letting go. She thought about what that woman had needed and hadn't had words for yet. Not a rescue, not a replacement, not someone to step into the space Derek had left and fill it with a different kind of authority. Just a door. Just an open door, and the knowledge that walking through it was her choice. She had saved herself. She knew that. She had driven through the rain by herself, sat across a desk from a dangerous man and held her own terms. Opened a ledger she hadn't been invited to touch, found what the professionals had missed, built the safety net independently, walked into the garage on her own legs, delivered the truth at the moment it mattered most. She had done all of that. Vincent had been honest when it was easier not to be. He had listened when the people around him only managed. He had chosen her strategy over his instinct, not once but at every moment when it counted. He had let her build what she needed to build without making it about him. He had been, in all the ways that actually mattered, the right thing at the right time. Not because a wrong number had delivered him to her. Not because the universe had arranged a romance in the wreckage of a betrayal. But because two people, each of them carrying damage in different shapes, had chosen deliberately, repeatedly, with full knowledge of the cost, to be honest with each other instead of safe. When he knocked on her door 45 minutes later, she opened it before he could knock twice. He was carrying groceries and wearing a jacket that was less formal than his usual, and his hair was slightly different from how it looked when he was performing Vincent Moretti for rooms full of people who expected a performance. She stepped back to let him in. He crossed the threshold of her apartment, her space, her terms, her life, and set the groceries on the counter and looked around once, the way he always did when he came here, with the expression of a man who is in a place he hasn't earned the right to take for granted and knows it. "Nice light in here today," he said. "It's the November light," she said. "It does that." She moved to the counter beside him. They worked in the comfortable parallel of people who had learned each other's rhythms, without making a project of it, him unpacking, her finding the right pan, both of them talking without looking directly at each other, which was sometimes the best way to say true things. "I've been thinking," he said. "About what?" "About the estate." He set a bunch of time on the counter. "The study. I want to turn it into something." She glanced at him. "Into what?" "An office for the foundation," he said. "If you'd consider it. A satellite location. For the fraud recovery work. The space is there, the security is there," and he stopped. "And I think it would be good for the house. To have something in it that is definitively yours." She was quiet for a moment. It was a significant offer. Not a possessive one. She registered the difference immediately. He was not asking her to move in or merge anything. He was offering a room in a building for work she'd built independently. "I'd want full operational autonomy," she said. "Obviously," he said. "And my name on the door, not yours." "That's the point," he said. "And Naomi would have to approve the security protocols." "Gabriel will love that," Vincent said, which was probably the least true thing he had ever said to her, and she knew it and laughed. And the kitchen filled with that sound, the real unguarded kind. She turned back to the pan. She picked up the lemon. She thought, briefly and clearly, about a dinner table a year ago, the candles burned low, the food gone cold, the long quiet of a woman waiting for a man who wasn't coming. She had set that table for the wrong person. This kitchen this morning, this man unpacking groceries beside her, while they disagreed about cooking and talked about serious things and moved in the same space without one of them disappearing into the other, this was what she had always been making room for. She just hadn't known yet that making room for it required burning the old version down first. She looked at Vincent beside her, and he looked back, and the look between them had the quality of something that had been tested thoroughly and had held. "Okay," she said, "the satellite office?" Yes. He nodded once. Then he went back to unpacking groceries, because he was a man who had learned slowly, at some cost, with her help, that the right response to getting what you want is not to make too much of it, but to simply continue. She picked up the lemon and got to work. Outside, Chicago moved through its November morning, indifferent and permanent, full of every kind of story, the ones that ended badly, and the ones that were still in progress, and the ones that couldn't be categorized as either, because they were something more complicated and more honest than either category allowed. Lauren Hayes had sent a breakup text to the wrong number. She had driven through the rain to a stranger's house. She had opened a ledger she wasn't invited to touch, walked into a parking garage knowing exactly what was waiting, and come out the other side with her name cleared, her future intact, and a life that was entirely her own. She had not forgotten the wrong man. She had simply refused to let him be the last word. And the right word, it turned out, was the one she'd been writing toward all along, not a man's name, not a love story's ending, but the simple, unassailable truth of a woman who had finally stopped editing herself down to a size that fit someone else's life. She had chosen herself first. Everything else had followed from that.